Welcome back to another JIDcast. I'm your host, Dina Gidio, and you're listening to the Closer to the Author podcast, the show that allows students to invest in young adult books and the authors who wrote them. From the classroom to the studio to cyberspace, thank you for tuning in. On today's show, we will be speaking with Camron Wright, author of The Rent Collector. Camron was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, and went on to earn a master's degree in writing and public relations from Westminster College. With notable experience in the fashion industry and business, it is his writing that has earned him Book of the Year by Forward Magazine, Best Novel of the Year at the Whitney Awards, and a nominee for the prestigious International Dublin Literary Award. It is an honor to welcome Camron Wright to our show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
So before we get into The Rent Collector, I was hoping you could give us a little backstory about your experience in the fashion industry and business.
Yeah, I'm not an English major. I'm a business guy. And so really writing for me was kind of a new experience. In business, my wife was a clothing and textiles major. I was, of course, a business graduate. And so shortly after we graduated, I kind of pushed her or talked her into starting a retail bridal store. And that evolved into then a fabric store as well.
So did any of those experiences help to prepare you to be a published author?
I think yes and no. I mean, really, again, it was so out of character for me with the business background, and I never would have guessed I'd delve into the whole writing thing. But life prepares you, right? I mean, in every one of my books, it all relates back to things that have happened to me, or some experience with my kids, or family, or stranger, or somebody you've met. I mean, you tend to file those things away, and then when it comes time to write, they go into the books.
Right. So you started publishing books later in life.
Yeah, so, we sold the retail bridal stores, and I'm kind of a personality. I need to wake up and feel like I'm making a difference. And I struggled, really had a time in my life where I really struggled to find sort of that satisfaction. And so it was a time where my wife was in a couple of book clubs, and she'd bring home these books, and I'd read them. And I don't know why, I have no idea, but I remember reading them and telling her one time, I could write this. I don't know why I thought I could, but I just sort of resonated that I could tell a story like this. And I think it probably applies to almost any profession that somebody wants to go into. Am I going to be successful? Can I do it? But yeah, announcing you want to be a writer is like, I want to be an actor, right? I mean, and the problem is there are so few that succeed on a professional level, and enough to bring, to support the family, et cetera. As a novelist. Now, clearly there are tons of writing opportunities in journalism and teaching and other things. And so I would say to people, if you want to be a writer, if you have that passion, pursue it, absolutely. But no, yeah, I'm always nervous. Every book you write, you're nervous. Is this going to be successful? Can I publish this one? Can I, I think that's what I say paradox because you're sort of driven to do it, but all the while worried that it will be successful. But a little worry can be a good thing at times too.
So your son, Trevor,
yeah,
he directed and produced a documentary called River of Victory, which tells the story of a young Cambodian mother who lives with her family on a dump. And while the dump is a source of income for the family, it's also killing her son. She eventually returns to her homeland, seeking the help of a traditional Cambodian healer. So how long after hearing Sang Lee's story did you feel inspired to write The Rent Collector?
It's pretty quickly. Trevor, he came home with hours of footage that he'd shot at the dump, and he had to edit it down to a 60-minute documentary. And so he asked for some help. And the first thought that rolled through my head was kind of this, I'm not going to be much help. I don't really have anything in common with the people there. And then I start to watch the footage, and almost immediately I fell in love with Sang Lee as a character. I mean, her determination to do whatever she needed to do to help her son was just inspiring. And so it didn't take really very long before the gears start turning, and I'm thinking, you know what, it's time to write another book. And so, yeah, I took real characters, real people out of his documentary, and then I sort of wove them into this fictional narrative that I'd been intrigued with for years, this notion of learning and literature and the common morals that we see repeat over and over again in classical literature. And there was a particular scene in his footage where these women are at the dump, and they work all day long to find enough to eat, right? I mean, they're just surviving day to day. Well, in this particular scene, these women were looking for something to read. And that really had an effect on me. I mean, it was powerful. I'm thinking they're in a dump, they're barely surviving, and yet they're looking for reading material. And so that's when I kind of realized, hey, I can mesh these two stories together. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that worked out. What I did. The Rent Collector is a sort of it's a more layered story. I'm writing this ode to classical literature. I'm paying homage to classical literature. And I know that, I can't treat this lightly. I mean, I've got to be able to have metaphor and meaning and layers of story in there. And so it was really a bigger project than I could handle. I don't write chronologically. I tend to write scenes as I see them in my head. And so I have all these scenes written, and I'm struggling to weave them all together into a cohesive story. To the point that I almost gave up. I pretty much said, yeah, I can't do it. I've got all these pieces, but I don't know how to connect them. I have no idea. I can't do it. And it was about that time that a good friend of mine, he was very instrumental in the success of Letters for Emily. And he passed away unexpectedly. He came home. He wasn't feeling well. He was a diabetic, but he laid down on the couch and then went to sleep, and he didn't wake up. And so it was at his funeral. I'm thinking, if for anybody's sake, for Earl, this friend of mine, I need to give this book one more try and finish it. And the best way to describe this is it's like you open up your computer and you've got these pieces, you don't know what to do with them, and you're sitting there, and all of a sudden an idea flies in. And it's like it's sitting right above the computer. I can see it right there almost. And it's kind of an idea on, oh, hey, you can tie these two pieces together this way. And so I start to type, and before I even start to type, a second idea, and then a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and all these ideas it's like they're just floating out there. And I'm typing as fast as I can, worried sick that I'm not going to be able to get this stuff into the computer before these ideas go away, and I won't remember them. So I'd work all day long till late at night. I'd get up the next day. I'd type like crazy, just trying to, get this story stitched together with these ideas I was having. And so, yeah, long story short, I took a year and 2 weeks. And yeah, to this day, I look heavenward and say, thank you, Earl, and in some ways I hesitate to tell that story because that is like such a small percentage of writing typically. Normally, you get up and you work all day and you try and, write a great paragraph or page or chapter, and you realize at the end of the day you've written just crap, and you're going to have to throw it away, and then you start all over the next day. I mean, normally writing is a real struggle, but there are rare moments where sometimes the ideas just come in and flow, and the Rent Collector, in its case, it was that 2-week period where I was trying to stitch it all together. Almost all of the characters really but one, are based on real people and real events. Now, some, like for example, Sang Lee going to the province to see the healer, I tried to write that exactly as I watched it unfold in the footage. And so all that it's accurate and exactly as it happened. There are other characters that they're like the Rent Collector, which Sang Lee had an angry old Cambodian woman who came around and collected her rent. Well, I took her as a character, and everything I know about her, I just told you. That's all I know. Angry old Cambodian woman collected her rent. Well, I used her in my story to sort of tell what happened to the Khmer people during the revolution. But she is, that character is still based on a real person from the documentary. The one character I made up was the character of Mally, or the young girl who's going to be sold into the sex trade. And I included her because I really just wanted to bring awareness to the problem that exists in some of these countries. And it's much better now than it used to be. There are organizations whose sole focus is to sort of eradicate the child sex trade. But I wanted to just not dwell on it, but bring awareness to it, shine the light of awareness on it. And so that's why I included her. But yeah, almost all of the other characters are really based on real people to one degree or another. Lucky Fat, there was a when Trevor was there filming, there's a little boy who didn't ever wear a shirt, and he was kind of chubby, and he'd follow him around. And Trevor said he was always happy and smiling. And so I took what I knew about him, everything I know about him, as I just told you, and then he became my Lucky Fat character. And so that's kind of how it worked. There's more, truth, reality, and in some character stories than others. It just sort of depends, but just a mixture.
So when you started out to write the book, did you have an intention or a message that you definitely wanted to come through?
I love the fact that immediately I'm thinking, wow, a story set in a Cambodian dump, like that's pretty cool, because it's just so unusual. And when it was a functioning dump, there were about 600 families who lived around the perimeter of the dump, and so they had their own community. And I noticed in the footage and when we visited as well, that the people are generally happy. Kids are playing soccer, families are, doing whatever families do. And so I was intrigued by that. And I was just really attracted to the dump as a setting. I knew that I wanted to bring in, learning and literature. And then I wanted to merge the story of Sang Lee going to the province to see the healer. And so those are kind of these basic elements that I knew I wanted to weave together. I wasn't quite sure how. And so again, I would just kind of start and write a scene, and then another scene, and an unrelated scene. And that's kind of how the story developed.
One of my students highlighted a quote in the book by Sang Lee in reference to the clock, and that reads, "Sometimes broken things deserve to be repaired." So can you expand on this use of symbolism for them?
Yeah, sure. And I love that the clock is an example, because sometimes, a lot of the people, not just in the dump, but me, you, everyone, we feel broken at times. We feel inadequate, and I think we look at others, and especially in the social media world, where all people post is the good stuff and the pretty pictures, and yet we realize life is a lot more messy, and we're not. Sometimes we don't feel like we measure up, and we feel broken, and so I just sort of love this notion of that. That we are like clocks, that and really anything that's broken that deserves to be repaired. And clearly the story is one of the major themes is a theme of redemption. And if you had to boil it down to what's the story about, I think it would be fair to say, well, it's a story of redemption. And so it's reinforcing that we all deserve to be noticed. We just deserve to be noticed as people, and that we matter. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to reinforce with that.